Hello, everybody, and welcome to another installment of Long Story Short Members Chat. It's the show where we interview members of Austin's creative community. This week, Long Center members are joined by our guests from the Austin Foundation for Architecture, and of course, myself from Pease Conservancy. I know the Foundation and the Conservancy are both delighted to be with you today live for another taping. I want to be sure to remind everyone that you can ask your own questions throughout the interview by using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We want to thank the Long Center members for continuing to support the Long Center during this difficult and crazy time. The Long Center and, of course, other nonprofits throughout our city could not continue their important work without your support. If you'd like to become a Long Center member and be part of the next Long Story Short Members Chat, sign up today at thelongcenter.org. My name is Heath Riddles-Sanchez, and I'm the CEO of the Pease Conservancy. I'm also a former director of marketing and communications at the Long Center, so I have a little bit of experience at the Long Center. I absolutely loved my time there, and I'm just delighted to be here today. I'm excited also to introduce you to our guest, Gerardo Gandy. He is the Exhibitions Committee Chair for the Austin Foundation for Architecture, as well as the designer behind park space installations, which you may have seen popping up in parks across the city. Welcome to the show, Gerardo, and we are very happy to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, Heath. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you bet. So, Gerardo, in your role as the Exhibitions Committee Chair at the Austin Foundation for Architecture, you were part of the team, obviously, that created the park space installations around town. We, of course, are lucky enough to have one installed at Pease Park a few months ago, which has been a huge hit, and we have absolutely loved seeing the process unfold and having it in the park. You and your volunteers just recently finished an installation at the Long Center. And so just tell us a little bit about Park Space, how it came about and what it is.
Sure. So as we mentioned, Park Space is a program of the Austin Foundation for Architecture. This group came together in around 2007, architects, designers, and even residents who really care about the quality of life in the city. And part of what they talked about is a shared belief that built environments is part of what we value as a community, both indoor spaces as well as the outdoor spaces where we gather and play, including the parks and green spaces. The Exhibitions Committee in particular is one of two of the most recent joint committees between the AFA and the AIA, which is the Austin Institute of Architects, American Institute of Architects Austin chapter. So when Ingrid approached me about this opportunity to lead this group, I was very excited. Last year, we started off with a bang. It was a 3x5x7 architectural model exhibit. And we brought together over 40 models showcasing the craft of model making and broad works from civic to dreaming, and brought together this great exhibition in downtown Austin with over 400 visitors. We also paired that with a speaker series that promoted collaboration with architects and young minds. We had a monster model workshop where we had models that were left over from some of the work at the School of Architecture that kids were able to, build on and mold and shape as they'd like to. So that being said, that's kind of where we were last year. We were in the ranks of getting everything ready for this year. And then this whole thing happened. So obviously being indoors in the exhibit space wasn't quite conducive to the new normal. So I think it was on a Thursday or a Friday that Ingrid called me, and she said, Gerardo, what are we going to do now? How are we going to shape? Obviously this is a very important program for us. And part of what we learned from last year was that design is a great way for us as an organization to interact with the local community in new ways. I think as architects, sometimes we tend to cloister ourselves or be a little insular and only hang out and speak in architect words, right? And this notion of exhibit and design work was a great way to show that there's a really great overlap and a need for bringing these different groups of people together and showing the value of design. So again, it was a short conversation over the phone. We talked about a few ideas. Later on that day, I grabbed my overpriced moleskin notebook, and I went out to Zilker Park. I sat down by that large tree that kind of overlooks downtown. And these are actually some of the initial sketches of it. And it just so happened that when I took my notebook out and let my dogs run around, it almost perfectly, the grid of my notebook almost perfectly aligned with the horizon of the city. And that's where this notion of using some sort of symbol or to show the social distancing guidelines was something that was valuable. And so that's where the design explorations came. Obviously we love parks here in Austin. And even more so now, with the usage that we've seen, the increased usage during COVID, we realized that there was a place for design. There was a need for design to come in and help visualize some of those social distancing guidelines so that we could safely use these spaces.
Yeah, and I think, the beautiful thing to us about Park Space has just been, we're always looking to bring new people to experience our space, people who haven't been there, and to experience it in new ways. And I think it was just such a well thought out idea to incorporate the ideas of design and public art and nature and connecting with beloved spaces around Austin, like the Long Center and Pease Park that we all know and love, but in new ways. And every detail of the project seems to have been so well thought out, from the overall concept, but also it's just infused with such, I think, creativity and connection in every way, where, each one was tied to a certain kind of wildflower and the color schemes and all of those things. Tell us a little bit about how the idea for the wildflowers and just the sort of creativity on top of creativity that seems to infuse this project.
Sure. So I think to your point, color was always something that was an integral part of this project from inception. I mean, you saw some of the early sketches, but I think it wasn't until one of the site visits that we did with y'all at Pease Park that we realized that color was really something that was all around us, and that it was such a beautiful way to connect these installations to our local community and the appreciation that we have for these different species of flora. In doing a little bit of research of finding out what flowers or colors might be best, I came across this great, really beautiful quote from Lady Bird Johnson, who of course is the former First Lady and noted conservationist. And she said, where wildflowers grow, so does hope. And I think that really encapsulate a lot of the meaning and kind of what we would like to see these installations as they kind of emerge as these bright flowers or blooms of color across the city. And hopefully that not only creates a space where people can inhabit safely, but also inspires and brings something beautiful to their life. I think even to that notion, something else that was kind of critical in this, in the development of this theory. Whenever I was actually during the beginning stages, I was back home in South Texas visiting my parents during all of this. And my father is a very frustrated architect, I would say. I mean, he studied economics, but he's a designer at heart. And all through architecture school, wherever I would share my projects with him, he always would follow up with these wild ideas and crazy texts, sometimes even sketches. Most of them were a little too crazy of ideas, right? I wouldn't pay much attention to them. Interesting, but maybe not worth pushing the boundaries for that. But there was once in a while these really great nuggets of information that really made me think of things differently. And I think in this one, as he saw this project develop, I don't think he quite understood it. He was questioning some of the things, and it wasn't until he saw the photos where he was like, wow, okay, yes, I see what you're doing there. But I think even more so, something that was great, my mother also had a great part of this. When we were thinking about new opportunities and new parks came about, I was trying to think of which wildflower species would be the best. And one of her ideas was actually using the colors of the prickly pear flower. I think she will always forever hold that over my head from now on, that it was those colors that she came up with the idea, which were beautiful and such a wonderful idea, was installed in one of the largest and most colorful installations that we did. So again, it was not only a great way to kind of push these explorations, but even to collaborate with my family in new ways there too.
Awesome. So, one of the sort of common threads between my work at the Long Center and my work at Pease Park is certainly the idea of, like we said, bringing new people to the space and having them experiencing it in new ways is valuable and wonderful. We all sort of seek that. But when we can have people interacting actually with the space, when that can be a very interactive experience, it's even better. When you layer on top of that and educate, it's like the triple threat. It's like the trifecta when there's a nice educational component as well, when people are learning a thing or two in the process. And so tell us about the educational kind of aspect of Park Space.
I'm excited to be part of a lot of different groups within Austin that are doing work in the realm of education, especially with young people. And one of the things that we've realized is that there really is a great need in Austin, even more so now as we're entering the school years, for there to be educational experiences, not only for youth, but even more so for parents or just the public in general. We're social creatures. We like to interact and learn. And as we've kind of been isolated, sometimes it's nice to have these other opportunities that you come across. So something that was important for us, in using these colors and rooting the design of these various installations in these wildflowers, was to have designing a series of signage pieces that would go along with the installations. The front side of which obviously tells a little bit about the installation, the program, how to navigate through them, and how to use it. But on the back side is where we had a little bit of fun. It's more site specific. It shows you a photo and the genus and the scientific name of the specific species of plant that inspired the color story for that particular installation, and as well as a series of really fun facts and trivia about these species. So again, it was a way to kind of double in instructions, but then also provide something that was more to the kind of learning on the backside as well.
Yeah. So another thread that I know is common for the Long Center and for places like public parks in general, and certainly Pease Park in particular, is this idea of sort of the equity lens, right? And the accessibility lens. And I know at the Conservancy, every decision that we make we place that lens over it. How, through making this decision, are we making our space more safe, accessible, more welcoming to all people? And I think this certainly accomplishes that. So once again, it goes back to how are we sort of bringing new people to the space in new ways. But also at the Long Center and at Pease Park, we talk a lot about how are the sort of sometimes embarrassment of riches, the focus of resources that have been brought to bear in these spaces, how do we allow that to sort of raise the tide, all the boats in the harbor, so to speak? And how can the benefits that we enjoy in these spaces also bleed over into other parts of the community that perhaps don't have such access to green space and to iconic artistic spaces? And you and I have talked a lot about this, right, personally, and it's something we are both very passionate about, and how we can, through the development of partnerships and collaborations, begin to bring perhaps park space and other things like this to other parks or other spaces beyond things like the Long Center and Pease Park. So talk a little bit about that and kind of where we hope to take it.
Sure. So Park Face has really been a very unique project, and it's really taking us into new places that we've never been for with these sorts of programming or community exhibits. I think first and foremost, it was this entire idea of Park Space was an initiative whose ideation, planning, and execution was all done remotely, or at least following the social distancing guidelines. Design presentations, ideation, review of drawings, all of that, even the site visits that we did with y'all. And I think in learning from all those experiences together, it's really ironic that in a time when we were encouraged to be apart, design has become a way for a conduit almost for all of us to come together and to bring us together. The large scale installations were new territory for us at the foundation. But in learning those ropes and reaching out to the city and our community, we were able to create these really wonderful lasting relationships across Austin, even some that I'm sure will continue even past this whole COVID thing that we're in right now. I mean, I think personally, you, Heath, we've formed new friendships there. I didn't know neither you or Chuck, and now every evening I'm jealous of all the great food that Chuck's cooking over at his house, those recipes. But apart from that, I think more importantly is just speaking to how this initiative has brought a lot of really great community partnerships together. And Pease Park was just a couple of blocks from the AIA, and as far as I know, I don't think we've ever have collaborated in a way such as that we have in the last couple of months. And I think in this journey, we've learned a lot about the mission of our organizations. And as you talked about, which in ways we can collaborate together to, tackle issues of access to parks and stewardship and resiliency. As we talked about, we've had early conversations about how we can use the resources of a conservancy that's well placed and well funded to help create equity or promote stewardship or the taking back of green spaces in other parts of the city that might not have as a robust support system in place. And sharing best practices, perhaps even using this installation as a bridge to create similar programming in both and create equity that way. So again, I think what's exciting about this is, we thought we were here to paint something on the ground, and here we are, a few months later having these other conversations that'll extend much longer than the paint will last on the current installation.
Absolutely. And I love what you're saying, but I think this project in such a beautiful way highlights the importance of partnership and collaboration. And our constituents, many of the people who are probably watching and listening, they demand that of us, right? And increasingly so as nonprofits and as stewards of the valuable resources that people entrust us with. I think it's incumbent on us, right, to figure out new ways to collaborate and partner with one another to make sure that our supporters are getting sort of maximum impact, the biggest bang for their buck. And we're stronger together than we are alone. We can do more together when we collaborate and partner. So yeah, I love also just, this idea of impact, right? And I think the greatest thing, and I learned this when I was at the Long Center, I became addicted to impact. And the idea that, when I was at the Long Center and we sitting around the table in the marketing department on a Tuesday or Thursday and coming up with great ideas, we knew that by Friday, we were going to be executing those ideas in a way that was going to be strengthening the fabric of this city. We were contributing in an impactful way to the very things that make the city great and that make Austin so attractive to people. And I think this is another great example of that. So I'm interested, in the idea also of connection. And I think that's kind of where you were really going. And that's really at its core what I think Park Space is about. And it's what we all are trying to achieve through our work and through the arts and through nature preservation. It's about connection with the space, connection with the arts, connection with nature, connection with one another, connection with other organizations around town, all of these things that we've been talking about. And I'm curious, sort of in your world as an architect and your study of architecture, how that study of people and their interaction with space from an outdoor perspective kind of plays into the creation of Park Space.
Sure. I think first and foremost, one of the key takeaways is that design really matters. Social distancing guidelines are a new norm and not necessarily something that's, it could be, clinical, but, if we employ design, we can find ways to make these feel beautiful, perhaps even inspiring. In this particular installation, we use some of the most basic materials and methods for installation. And I think, we all came together to create something that's beautiful and educational, but more importantly, keeps us safe. Past that, we in the end, as you mentioned, we're social creatures and we crave interaction with one another and our environment. So how do we interact with our environment in new ways? I mean, some of the things that we've been thinking about or that we've seen recently, for example, as designers of the built environment is how that's affecting our new day-to-day life. We've seen in gyms and retail stores how there's measures in place that limit the occupancy of space in an attempt to create more elbow room. As you mentioned, Heath, it's one of the observations that you guys have seen is that there's been a large trend of increased park usage in green spaces all across Austin, not just in Pease Park. And one of the things that I've personally been giving some thought to is how can we continue to use design to create these safe spaces for all. Personally, I think I'd like to think that we can come up with better solutions than limiting access to parks and green spaces. It's something that's so important and vital for all of us. and even more so, just not even having to go as far as just closing them. So what are the ways that we can kind of help use design as a way to alleviate congestion or maybe spread out park users within the space? I think there's things that we can explore together. Is it about leveling peak hours, and how do we do that? Is it done through programming where we perhaps create something that's attractive to park users at a time that isn't usually seen as the most popular time to be at a park? Does this employ lighting strategies or whatever it may be? On the other end, is it about peak hours during sunlight, and in which case can we create shade structures versus whether natural or built to kind of push people out from in their homes at the times where it's just not nice to be outside? Is it evaporative cooling? There's all sorts of really great things that we can do with design to help create something that's a little bit more leveled out and continue to enjoy these green spaces with the help of design.
Yeah, so we got a couple interesting questions here from people who are listening, and I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions. And they're questions that certainly make sense. They're kind of logistics questions, and getting kind of how you actually pulled this off. Well, one person asked, how did you manage to measure and plan the grids so perfectly on a large scale? I had that same question, and I got to watch it unfold, so I know the answer. I want to hear your take on it.
So part of what's so great about Park Space is that it was a truly interdisciplinary effort. We worked with a land surveying company called Forward, and they were integral to the entire design, and they really set the stakes quite literally for us to be able to come through with installations. So they went out there, they photographed with a drone. We send over the designs, their input into this fancy GPS system that they have, and they'll go out there and basically pinpoint the different locations that we then use to put the string and then paint the lines. So it really does create the groundwork for us to put these installations together.
Yeah. And so kind of also along that vein, I know, we did site visits out at the park. We walked around to kind of different corridors of the space and evaluated them for how appropriate they might be for this. How did those kind of particular aspects of the Long Center or other parks and the specific space influence the final layout or design?
Both the conversation I think can go two ways. A part of, in a broader sense, working with the City of Austin, the Parks and Recreation Department, something that was important for us was to make sure that these installations were put in place where they were needed the most. And that, of course, we used some of the data that they had from the health department as to where some of the higher cases of COVID or the areas where it was a little bit more prevalent might be, and making sure that we align that with a green space in that area. So the first park that we installed was Roy Guerrero on the east side, and it was specifically for that reason. So past that of making sure that they're placed in a place where they're needed, and where they can truly help the community kind of navigate this new world. Past that is really working with our partners and the different groundskeepers of the spaces, and understand where are the most popular spaces to sit out and to enjoy these parks. Heath, whenever we thought at one point of maybe placing the installation underneath some of the trees or shade. We also looked at the volleyball courts, and there was great path of travel with the running trail just along it, and we thought maybe perhaps that would be a good instance for that. At Zilker, for instance, we placed it in an area that was right before the 4th of July, which is typically used by a lot of families to celebrate holidays and birthday parties and barbecue. So again, it was more of a result of the need that drew those solutions, and that's how we narrowed in on those locations.
So, certainly at Pease Park, we are so passionate about that space where art and nature meet. And this is such a brilliant example of that for so many of the reasons, the interactive nature of it, the educational component to it, all of those make it so perfect. It's been done very well, I think, in other spaces around the country and throughout the world. I wonder if there are any other specific green spaces or installations that have inspired you personally, either throughout the country or beyond. That's actually a question from my friend Liz. I can't take credit for that.
I mean, there's so many wonderful parks around our city, and I think we'd be excited to work with any organization who wants park space to be a resource for their community. You know, one of the ones that is coming up, and one of the next ones on our list, is we're actually in talks with the Trail Foundation for an installation near the Congress Bridge, where people gather to view the bats. And we have some great ideas in store that we're exploring there. You know, we're being inspired by the shape of the echolocation sonars that are used by the bats, even some of the colors of the fruits and the flowers that are used that the bats feed on. But again, you know, I think we'd be excited wherever it is. We can always find some sort of unique story or design thinking that we can apply and see where the design takes us.
So, Gerardo, if I'm wandering around the city, just looking for that sort of authentic Austin experience, and I stumble on one of these installations and get to experience it just sort of organically, what is it that you hope I come away from this experience feeling or having learned?
You know, again, I think it's really that design really does matter, and that it's a great way of bringing us together. You know, these installations were done with the community in mind, and it was a great way of seeing so many people just quickly come together, both volunteers from so many organizations, architects, contractors, landscape designers, architects, you know, everyone really came together along this collaborative vision of creating safer spaces for our community. And so I'd encourage everyone to, you know, get involved and support and see how they can lend a hand in everything that we do, both in Austin and beyond.
And sometimes I think the measure of success can be, were there new friends made? And I think we can definitively say yes to that. So I'm so grateful to you and for you, Gerardo. This has been such a great experience for us at Pease Park, and I know at the Long Center and others. I hope that everyone in the city gets the opportunity to experience park space. That's all the time we have for now, unfortunately, but I do want to say thank you so much to everyone for the Long Center's Long Story Short Members Chat. The Long Center appreciates your support, and if you'd like to join them live for another taping of Long Story Short, check out their membership page at thelongcenter.org. A big thank you once again to Gerardo Gandy and Ingrid Spencer from the Austin Foundation for Architecture for bringing park space to the Long Center lawn, and a special thank you to Gerardo for joining us today on Long Story Short. You can stop by the Long Center lawn to check out the installation as well as Pease Park and various other parks around town. Please remember to stay 6 feet apart and wear a mask when in public. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for being with us today.